special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to TEDxMontréal Salon. We are thrilled to have you with us today. My name is Marina. I am a member of the TEDxMontréal team. Whether you are joining us for the first time or again, live or in replay, locally or abroad, we are pleased to have you. For those who are new to TEDxMontréal, this is our salon-style event, an intimate evening on a specific topic. Tonight, it is on shaping the future of the restaurant industry. For a little bit of context, TEDxMontréal is one of over 3,200 cities running TEDx events. Our team of 20 volunteers joins over 40,000 volunteers globally, producing on average 10 events a day, and all in the service of sharing ideas. Let's just take a moment here and let that sink in. I know I personally was stunned when I first learned this. At TEDxMontréal, our mission is to elevate Montreal-born ideas onto this global TEDx stage. Today, we have the pleasure of sitting down to chat with Mandy Wolfe, chef and co-owner of Mandys, Mark Cohen, chef and co-owner of Lawrence and Larry's, hosted by Leslie Chesterman, food writer and restaurant critic for over 20 years.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this wonderful TED event, which tonight is shaping the future of restaurants. And I'm thrilled to have two participants by my side, two really important figures in the Montreal restaurant and dining scene. First of all, I'd like to introduce Mandy Wolfe. And Mandy, if you're not aware, is the Mandy, along with her sister Rebecca Wolfe, behind the Mandys chain of wonderful, super original high-end salad restaurants, a chain now that I believe is up to 8 stores, 9 or 8?
8.
8. I added one for you. And they were going since 2004, and I think their rise has been incredibly rapid. And welcome, Mandy. And our other participant tonight is Mark Cohen, who a lot of us have been following for a long time at his wonderful restaurant. He's a co-owner of the fantastic restaurant Laurence, which is on St. Lawrence, on the corner of Fairmount, fine dining restaurant. But as well, Laurence has a butcher shop called the Boucherie Laurence. And he also has a wonderful wine bar called Larry's. So welcome everybody. And we're gonna talk tonight about how they've been coping with these hard times. And not only the bad, but a lot of good as well. So I wanna start off with a question for both of you, which is a little bit to, we'll start with Mandy though, but ladies first, to set the scene. What was your business like pre-COVID? I mean, what were, even your hours, what was your regular day like? How were you feeling about your business?
Honestly, business was great. We were in growth mode. We were expanding. We had managed to open 2 new locations pretty much every year. We had launched salad dressings in grocery stores across Canada. I mean, it was busy. We were working, 50, 60-hour weeks. There were the usual headaches of operating multiple restaurants, and tight cash flow is always an issue for restaurateurs, and struggling with a work-life balance for both my sister and I who have kids at home. But business was good.
Right. And you, Mark?
Yeah, it's been good. Sort of going in the same direction as it had been for the last 10 years or so. It was pretty busy, you know, like critically acclaimed. We're happy with what we were doing, working a lot, and not really ever turning a profit.
Right. Okay, but sticking with you now, Mark, as much as things were going well for you, I just wanted to ask you to go in a little bit about the restaurant industry as a whole, some of the challenges that it was facing. I mean, it wasn't all wonderful. I mean, there were a lot of huge issues in the restaurant world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were talking about things like, why are restaurants failing all the time? Like we hear statistics about, I don't know, 70% of restaurants fail in the first like however many years. Why is that happening? Why are kitchen workers earning so much less than their front of house counterparts? Why are we allowing this kind of toxic macho chef culture to persist? And yeah, I don't know. What's the experience of the sort of people working in the kitchen who are not, or front of house as well, who are not cis het white men? So like lots of questions and lots of challenges. Mostly sort of in the background and kind of to the backdrop of just trying to stay afloat on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Okay. But you know, it is true that as somebody who wrote a million articles about all the things going wrong with the restaurant industry, even too many restaurants in the city, all kinds of things, it really kind of happened, was peaking before COVID. But yet, despite all this, I want to get Mandy in on this about, although like you were expanding well, you were feeling optimistic, like what was your next step for your business?
We had some really exciting plans. It was in February where my sister and I had gone to Toronto, and we'd been talking about expanding out of province for years now. And we'd made a big Instagram post in February, Toronto, we're coming for you, spring, summer, fall, 2020. That obviously didn't happen. We had a cookbook that was coming out in May that had to be pushed a couple of months. I mean, we were really optimistic, and beyond sort of the expansion of our own business, we were just seeing some really interesting trends in the food scene, seeing more locally sourced ingredients, seeing a lot of collaborations among restaurateurs in the city. Within our own company, we put values together that we were really seeing manifest in our restaurants and with our teams. Like, all of our packaging was compostable. We were working on our charity, the Welcome Collective, since 2017. We were able to hire refugee claimants within our restaurants. Like all of these great, things that we really stand for as a company and as individuals were really coming to fruition. So we felt so encouraged to keep going in the right direction. So There was some optimism.
Right. Okay. Well, I think you can all imagine where we're going next. But before we do that, we want to try with another breakout room for you. And the discussion question right now is, as a customer, what was your reaction during the time of the crisis? Did you feel that you wanted to support your local restaurant? Did you sense that your local restaurant was there for you? So discuss.
I think it was really like a fight or flight thing that kicked in. It was like a couple of days of like emergency meetings and how are we gonna make this work? Like not really any time for like panicking or like, I don't know. It felt like decisions needed to be made like very quickly, and that's ultimately what we did.
And you, Mandy?
There was definite fear, a little bit of panic behind the scenes. I think that when you're in a position, when you have a team working with you, it's best to not show that you're freaking out because everyone's turning to you for the tone that you're setting. So for sure, there was a lot of information being thrown around, and we were tuning into news briefings every day and trying to gather the information. If we were allowed to stay open, what were the parameters within which we could still operate? But it was definitely scary. I mean, 8 locations and hundreds of staff, and you're worried about, health. And in our case, we had all the kids home from school. I mean, it was a lot. It was definitely a lot.
Okay. And for you, Mandy, what were the moves that you had to make at the beginning really to stay open? Like because there were some restaurants that decided to close. Did you guys close at all, or did you stay open?
In all honesty, we went back and forth, Becca and I, and we really struggled with the decision on a community moral level. Like, was it irresponsible to stay open? Is it doing more harm to stay open and maybe put our community at risk, or our staff at risk, ourselves at risk? But as we were listening to what government and public health officials were saying, that provided you can do takeout and delivery, you're deemed pretty much an essential service because you're offering food to people who are holed up, stuck at home. But what we didn't have to do much on the delivery and takeout side, fortunately, because we've always been a takeout and delivery model. We had our packaging already set up. The food was really easily transportable. So we feel really lucky that we had that already sorted out. We had delivery systems in place with third-party delivery services. We used our app for people to come and order contactless, so they didn't have to, touch anything or interact with anybody. We did, however, have to close 2 of our downtown locations. Montreal, the core of downtown, was really a ghost town the first 2-3 months. Every office was shut, retail was shut. It was a ghost town. So that was a bit stressful, cleaning out, scrubbing down the restaurants, cleaning out the fridges and freezers with our coworkers and husbands, and distributing food to shelters or putting them back in the other restaurants. And we were looking for ways in which we could continue to serve food in the safest way possible. And at the time, and he's still around doing wonderful things. He's a chef by the name of Jose Andres, and he has World Central Kitchen, and his organization sets up safe ways to feed people in crisis. So he'd been doing this post hurricanes and earthquakes and all kinds of natural disasters. And when the Princess cruise ship was stranded off the West Coast, he was there. Like, he flew out there to help feed the people, because in a crisis, people need to eat. So, I mean, that's the extreme end of feeding people, but we were really looking to him. He created these green zones, these safe zones within establishments to make sure people are properly distancing, the sanitization that needs to happen. So this is really in the early stages of the pandemic. We were looking to him and his organization for those answers. Another thing we did was put together grocery boxes. For myself and pretty much everybody I knew, going to the grocery store was a disaster. I mean, the lineups were crazy. The stores looked like they'd been ransacked. I mean, scarce ingredients, long delivery times. It was really a situation. So we had our suppliers sitting on inventory that was going to waste because so many institutions had shut down. We had people stuck at home who couldn't get to the grocery store. So we started doing fresh produce boxes, meal kits, do-it-yourself taco boxes, and morning smoothie boxes, and things to make it fun, like a kid's box with cookie dough. And we tried to think of innovative ways, like what would we like to have stuck at home? And we also were able to deliver those boxes and meals to hospital workers and workers in the long-term seniors residences here in Quebec, where most of the pandemic really was the worst. And we were also able to deliver food to refugee claimants through Welcome Collective, to families who were stuck at home, who didn't make it to the food bank. So we really tried to use our food business to help people as much as stay alive and afloat as well.
Right. And wow, it's like you totally rebounded and jumped into doing a million things, like survival mode, it sounds like. But there's another side too, which is, and I'm going to ask Mark this time, what was the reaction of your customers? Because there is such a relationship between restaurants and their customer base. And it really was a moment, if everybody remembers the early days, you couldn't even get a bag of flour, of lentils. And having visited you guys in the early days, I'm just wondering if you could describe your relationship with the customers. How did the customers, you can do a million things, but were the customers there to support you?
Yeah, absolutely. Our customers have been amazing. Very, very supportive. I think there was this sort of, I mean, there's two sides of it. There's one, like people need to eat, like, and people don't want to necessarily cook for themselves. So there's always going to be that demand, and you want to be able to provide for people. so they're coming to you because they want what you got. But there was also a real sense of like, people were aware that like the restaurant industry was suffering, and people wanted to like make sure that the restaurants that they like stay afloat. So there was this sort of community spirit, not just like people making sure to like order from the restaurant, but also just being very understanding. Like, we, unlike Mandy, who was already very organized with the takeout and delivery, like we absolutely were not. Like, you know, we'll chuck like the end of your meal in a box and let you take it home. But like, we've never offered like takeout or delivery as a real thing. So like, getting to grips with that in the first few weeks, like having nights where we just like stopped answering the phone because like we were too overwhelmed, or like, you know, putting food in boxes that like didn't really fit, or like was way too big or way too small. Like, apologies to like anyone who like bought a banoffee pie from Larry's in the beginning of the pandemic, and when it arrived it was like completely squished. But you know, you
did your best.
We did our best, and I think people respected that, and you know, people wanted their banoffee pie, but they also wanted to like help us like get through it. Right. So there was a nice symbiosis there. Right. But I think we really learned that like people, I mean, we know that people always need to eat, and I think we learned that people, they're never going to want to cook for themselves like every night. Like people still want their like comfort, you know, the thing that they're used to having as a treat. People wanted to treat themselves all the time. So that was really heartening to see.
Yeah, I think there was solidarity there between customers and restaurant owners. Like we knew that the restaurant industry would really be in trouble, and I think some people just really want to make an effort also to support their restaurants as much as they could, and to this day to make sure they're there when all this is over. You know, I still think that feeling is still very much present. Maybe more so at the beginning because we didn't know how long it would be, but there you go. But on the other side, and I want to ask Mandy this question, like the customer coming in was, you know, there were no masks back then. People were worried. There's a lot of distancing. But I'm wondering how your staff felt, because the staff would be actually seeing a lot more people than the customers would. The customers are in and out, right? But your staff is seeing new people all day. So first of all, did you have to lay off staff? Was that difficult? Of course. Did you did the people want to come and work? How did your staff react to this?
It was really a mixed bag. First of all, I have to say that our team, our frontline workers, you know, they really were frontline workers working in the restaurants, dealing with, interacting with people, with suppliers and customers, are such all-stars. But at the beginning, yes, there were unfortunately difficult decisions that needed to be made, especially closing 2 restaurants, trying to redistribute staff. But some of the choices were actually made for us, or made it easier for us, because the comfort or the approach to COVID at the time, it was like a real spectrum of comfort and discomfort, or like, there's no way I'm leaving my house and I'm not going to work. I live with somebody who's compromised, and we respected everyone's decision and everybody's choice. We made it clear to everybody what options there were, what assistance the government was providing, so that nobody had to freak out and worry that they couldn't make their rent or get their groceries. And, you know, looking back at that time, we're so used to our restaurants bustling with staff and customers, and it was such an eerie time where we had a handful of people working in the open locations, and some of the people working in the locations were not even location-specific employees. They were people from our head office. Like, we had our head of HR, you know, making salads and doing Uber Eats orders for us. We had everybody from administrative positions rolling up their sleeves, doing dishes, getting in their cars, doing deliveries. It was really, if you're looking for a team building exercise, get into a crisis with them. And if you can make it together, if you can make it through COVID, you can really make it through anything. We're so grateful to them.
Let's hope this is the worst test that you ever have. I mean, now, Mark, what I'm super interested with you is that since you have 3 different kinds of businesses, so you have a fine dining restaurant, you have a wine bar, and you have a butcher shop. So how did you make a decision of what the priority would be, and how did you diversify your business to meet the needs? Because the need was not fine dining inside. There were different needs. So what was your approach there?
Well, I mean, as Mandy said, there was initially some element of pressure to actually not stay open. Like people were saying, like, this is, you know, you got to just close now, and you know, maybe in a month, then we'll all be okay. But like the responsible thing to do is shut down, and that's not really viable from a business point of view. But I think we kind of had to say, well, if we're gonna be open, then like let's make sure that we're providing the community like with what they want and what they need, which is obviously in our interest because we want people to buy stuff from us because we need the money, and it's in their interest because they don't want to line up for an hour outside the supermarket to get their whatever it is. So I think, yeah, we felt like a bit of responsibility to play our part in like helping make sure that the food chain was healthy. You know, like we had like shortages of eggs and flour, and people weren't eating fewer eggs or consuming more flour than they were pre-COVID. It was just they were getting it all from the supermarket instead of like going to the restaurant or going to the school or like work or like a football game or whatever. Like people were just buying it all at the supermarket. So the supermarket can't handle that kind of strain. Like it was struggling as it was. And so like shutting down any other part of the food supply would have been a terrible thing to do. So we started selling a lot more like fruit and vegetables at the butcher shop, like made sure like we got as much flour as possible, just like a few more sort of like day-to-day things. And that went down really well. Like I think people were sort of making a decision at that time. You know, if I'm gonna go out to a store, I'm gonna go to one store.
Right.
So if we wanted them to come to us, and if they wanted to come to us, we kind of needed to make sure that like we had most of the things that they needed.
Right.
And you know, you follow the government guidelines and offer as much as you can, and that's really all you
but
can do.
It's a good thing you had the butcher shop, because you kind of had to step up from a lot of other people who closed their restaurant for a month. You had a store. You had eggs, you had butter, you had, you know, when I couldn't find eggs at the supermarket, I actually got your great eggs at your butcher shop. You had flour, you had wine, you had a lot of things. So weren't you happy to have that already with, you know, as part of your little empire?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it also allowed us to like move staff over. Like all of a sudden we needed 50% more staff than we had working at the butcher shop, and we needed, I don't know, 50% less staff than we needed at the restaurant. So that having that diversity was definitely helped us a lot.
A plus. Mandy, I wanted to ask you a little bit, because especially in the States, there's been a lot of talk about the government not helping a lot. I'm wondering how you felt about, you know, the local government, federal government. Did you think the government was there for restaurants at the outset? And what about today?
I have to say we were really impressed with all the help that the government was offering right from the get-go. I mean, the information was very confusing at the beginning, but really quickly they put together a lot of great resources for businesses. So everything from our staff who needed to get on CERB to small, medium-sized short-term financing through the emergency business account. They also helped out with the emergency wage subsidy to keep staff on payroll, so you didn't have to let them go and then rehire them. And there was, even on the local level here in Montreal, I received phone calls from local member of parliament asking how she could help, how she could help restaurants. We were invited to participate in a Zoom meeting with the mayor and other restaurant owners in the downtown core to see if there's anything that she could help us with, or to air, you know, issues that we were having, because so many restaurants were struggling, especially with the lack of tourism and a Grand Prix and just everything, you know, universities being closed. So I feel very fortunate that we're in Canada and very impressed with the help and the programs that they put forth.
Wow. Yeah. So another huge thing that happened during, I mean, kind of in the heart of COVID times was like huge, massive uprising because of Black Lives Matter, which absolutely had to do with us as well. As much as it was a big uprising in the States, we also felt these repercussions, and for the better. So I want to ask the two of you, because that became another element in restaurants to have to really rethink, you know, if we're going to be reshaping our restaurants and we're changing so many things, maybe something we should change is adapting policies towards racism. Or, you know, Black Lives Matter, certainly there are other issues too, but especially that situation, the repercussions from that movement. I wonder if we could start with Mark, and you can tell us how you felt and how you felt you could better your business when it came to these social problems.
Yeah, that's obviously a huge question, and you know, will hopefully be the subject of many more talks and TED Talks, and you know, we'll go through it a little bit now, but yeah, I don't know, we only have so much time. I think when George Floyd was murdered and Breonna Taylor was murdered, it happened at a time when most people were quarantined. They were at home, and people had, maybe for the first time, actually some time to process, to think about what that meant to them, what they thought about it, not just reading the headlines and then like, gotta go to work tomorrow. So there was really time for people to actually process, and I think a lot of industries, like the restaurant industry, were really forced to confront the fact that, consciously or not, they do exploit and they do oppress and they do profit from, and in some cases were built on the subjugation of Black lives. I think many white restaurant owners were kind of shown up to be quite ignorant of many of the issues facing Black people in the workplace. We have not been providing a safe work environment for them, and the process of putting that right is going to take an awful long time. This is not a new problem, and it's not going to be solved in like a few weeks. But we really need to be centering the needs of Black and non-Black people of color as we rebuild the industry. This shouldn't really be a conversation between three white people. I can talk about it as a white business owner, and there's some things that I think really need to happen going forward. Tipping's got to go. That's the practice that was kind of popularized in post-Civil War America as a way for business owners to avoid paying the like emancipated African American workforce like anything. They just relied on you know, people's generosity if they felt like they deserved to earn some money, and that's, you know, that's we live with that. We kind of live with that dynamic still in a smaller way. Like there's still a smaller minimum wage for tipped workers. That customer server dynamic is still awkward, and there's a weird like power dynamic. You know, like the customer is always right, and that's sort of, you know, it sort of leads to like sexual harassment and people feeling like they have like power over you because they feel like they're paying for something more than just like you doing your job. And people tip based on a few things, like how much they choose to leave their servers based on a few things. And it doesn't have a whole lot to do with like how the service was. People tip based on, firstly, whether you just are someone who tips well. Some people tip well, some people tip badly. It doesn't matter really what their experience is. If you're in a good mood, if you enjoyed your food, which has nothing to do with the server, and like, none of those things should determine like how much money you take home. And people tip Black people less. Like that's just a fact. So we just got to get rid of that.
It's a long list. There are long. When we're talking about reshaping restaurants, this is absolutely a topic that we'll have to look into the future. Which leads us to our next. It's just for time reasons, I would have asked Mandy to go on as much as Mark, but we're moving on to our next section. Maybe we can bring up some of these things in the next section, which is, I'm wondering during this whole time, if either of you, maybe we'll start with Mandy, was there ever a moment that you just said, oh my God, we're doomed, I'm done, where this is over? Mandy, did you ever feel like down in the dumps, I'm giving up, we worked so hard, this whole thing's falling apart? Were you optimistic, pessimistic?
There was never for a moment did I think of throwing the towel in. I can't. It's my life. Everything. It's my life. My life. I work with my family. The team is my family. I love any kitchen. I love the whole experience of it. Like I can't see myself doing anything else. I love it, love it, love it. And we're a resilient industry. So, come at us, coronavirus. We'll bounce.
We're ready for you. And Mark, how did you ever say, oh my God, we're doomed?
No, not at all. Like you have to try to rise to the challenge and make it work. So no.
It was never an issue. But now we're coming up on the second wave and something that's going to be massive for restaurant owners, which is closing of terraces. So I want to start off with Mandy because you have more terraces than Mark. What's your feeling now? Because it's getting cold quickly, and I'm wondering how you're feeling once they close. What are you doing to keep them open? I mean, will we be there with sweaters on or parkas?
Well, we're hoping that there will be some allowance because there's usually a firm cutoff date for terraces. That's it. They're done, shut them down. But if weather permits, if there's not a ton of snow, if we can sort of extend it or at the discretion of the business owner to keep it going, within reason, we would invest in outdoor heating lamps or, get nice blankets. I don't know, like get creative or make little, plexiglass pods that you could sit outside in and be served within, necessity breeds creativity. So however we can do it, we will. I mean, it is a little bit scary to think of a second wave, which seems to be right at our door with all the evidence and mounting cases here in Montreal and in Quebec. But I do think on the positive side that we're better prepared for it, and it's not as hysterical as it was back in March. There's a lot of heightened drama and not understanding. There was a lot of misinformation being spread and circulated. And I think that we can do this better. If you are in the restaurant industry and you don't have a delivery service, like I urge you to get on that, get your packaging right. I think that's definitely going to be a continuous way for you to get the food to the customer, wherever the customer is. And it might not be in your dining rooms and it might not be on your terraces.
Right. There's no point resisting delivery. I mean, it's just obvious, isn't it? Which kind of turns me over to Mark, because I think that despite all of the hardships, and I think Mandy said something very good about, now we're ready for it if it happens again, because in the beginning, nobody knew even how much distance, masks, no masks, touching things, touching packaging, delivery packaging. That was a huge issue. A lot of people didn't want to do delivery because they're afraid of the packaging. That's kind of not an issue anymore. But I want to know, Mark, because when you think about all the things that you did to get going again, to really keep, your businesses alive, but this forcing you to be creative, I mean, there must be a silver lining to the kind of hard times that you discovered that you had a lot of ideas that maybe you weren't exploiting before. Like, was there a silver lining for you in these tough times?
Yes, I think you have to see challenges as opportunities to try to do things better. I think when you're when you're confronted with an existential threat, in some ways it's liberating because you stop comparing like what you want your future to look like with what the present looks like, because the present is like ripped from underneath you. So you can start thinking about how to rebuild, without saying, well, if I do this, like, are my numbers going to go down, or like, is this going to go up? Like how, you know, if we were barely getting by before, then how are we going to do this and stay afloat? Like now it's like, that's all gone. So how do we go forward? I think the public is also, at a point where they're very open-minded about things. They are expecting change and expecting innovation. One thing that we did, which is something that I've always wanted to do, is we switched our two restaurants. We have a larger restaurant and a smaller restaurant. And I've wanted to switch them for a while, but always sort of thought, well, if it doesn't work out, then I don't know, it's not going to be received well. And then if you switch back, then it's awkward. Now it's like no one has any expectations. You can do what you want to do, see how it goes. If it doesn't work, do something else. And people are very much on board with it. And yeah, and it lets us sort of like start with this new model, and just sort of coming back a little bit to the last question I was answering. I know we're like a little push for time, but you know, I'd rather cut some stuff out from down the bottom. But it's relevant here too. Like we need to be setting up this new system, and baking stuff in at the bottom. So like, I don't know, providing training for ourselves and for our staff on like anti-oppression and anti-racism, looking at our hiring practices. Like, are we putting ads where like Black and non-Black people of color are seeing the ads and feeling like they want to apply, or feeling like they might get the job, or feeling like they even want the job? Or are we just like hiring our friends?
Right.
Like,
what about also training on site? I mean, there are a lot of people who come in lower ranking jobs in kitchens who could be trained to do higher ranking jobs. You know, that's another thing, is instead of getting new people all the time, is maybe training people in the lower positions to move up. A lot of you know, there are stories of dishwashers who become the chefs. And that's another thing too, is offering on-site training. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's something that it feels like there's no time always. But like, actually, if you take a step back and you think about it, well, like hiring someone new, that's going to take them a few weeks before they're up to speed, and there are all sorts of costs associated with you know, high turnover of staff. So like, maybe let's take a second to like make sure that the people that are working for us like working for us, want to keep working for us, and want to like grow with us.
Right. And maybe the pay discrepancy also, figuring out ways to change that horrible pay discrepancy before front of house and back of house, which was such a huge issue before COVID. These are times to start looking for solutions, no-shows, all these problems. The list is long, you know, and but now's the time to tackle them. And yet I think all this time that you might have spent looking to solve problems or to create a better environment, there must have been a lot of things also that you said, we're ditching this because this was a waste of time. And I want to ask Mandy a little bit about, like, in this time of COVID, like, what did you just say, forget about it? You know, also to make your lives more pleasant. You know, a lot of people who work in the restaurant industry have not great family lives because they work all the time. So I'm just wondering for you, what did you just say, this is going?
It's a great question. And there were definitely things like extra, you know, flowery bells and whistles that we believe make up a part of our brand. You know, our brand is made up of a lot of tiny little details, whether it's freshly cut flowers that we get delivered every week, to carefully curated playlists, artisanal 7 different types of kombuchas and chocolates, you know, the art in the dining room. And these tiny details come at a high cost, and it's not really the crux of the business. So if we're going to be business owner and lead with business acumen and, you know, get us out of this situation, the focus is not going to be on the bohemian tendencies of my sister and I. It's going to be on, okay, people want our food. They want it delivered. They want it in a safe way. Let's make that happen. Let's focus on, you know, what's going to work in this situation. So all of that creativity kind of went to the back burner. No crazy menu changes right now. Usually we switch up and we do something a little bit strange every month. We're slowly getting back into it, but at the beginning we were like, no, let's just stick to the basics.
Okay, and so for Mark, with all the things, just to go back to also what you said, but also just to carry over what Mandy said, which is about getting rid of the things that are different. I know you were talking the other day about maybe you didn't have to keep one of your restaurants open as late, but also this little bit of an idea of how do you imagine now your restaurants moving forward? What will you keep and what will you ditch? Like, how do you imagine your restaurants? I don't want to say when we're all vaccinated, but when times are a little less challenging.
Yeah. Well, I think like Mandy, we had this sort of quick evaluation of like, what are we doing that makes sense financially? What are we doing because like we like it and it sort of adds color to the business, to the restaurant. And there was like definitely some months where, like a few months at the beginning there, where it was like, okay, get rid of all the stuff that we're not making money on because like we need to survive right now. And then I think when you start to add those things back, you can take a breath and like maybe be a little bit more careful about striking that balance between like finding things that are sustainable financially and without losing like everything that like adds color to the restaurant and to the restaurant industry. So I think just like, yeah, making more conscious decisions. I don't think we want to end up in a, you know, homogenous restaurant scene where everyone's only making fried chicken sandwiches.
There's a lot of that, by the way. I've never seen so much fried chicken in my life.
Yeah, I don't think I've actually eaten a fried chicken sandwich since it started.
So you have to get out more. There are a lot of them. I'll give you a list after them.
Yeah, okay. So not only fried chicken sandwiches, like we gotta have the other stuff too, but like let's make sure that we're staying on top of it financially. We're also like taking the plunge and getting rid of tipping in our restaurants completely. We're going to switch to a kind of revenue share situation. It's a little scary, but I'm sure we'll figure it out.
You can try it. Also, I just wanted to ask you, as a fine dining chef, are you going to keep up with the takeout delivery? Because that was it was a kind of a snobby situation that fine dining restaurants didn't do this, although fine dining restaurants usually sometimes cater. But is that something you'll maintain?
I think we'll keep it for Larry's, yeah. I think when we all had to do takeout and delivery, when we all had to put our beautiful dishes in like little brown cardboard boxes, then it sort of legitimized it. Like you're used to seeing that now. You can get like prettier takeout boxes and you know, sort of tailor the menu slightly to being appropriate for that. I think chefs and restaurants have seen like you can do it. And now that we have done it, it doesn't feel so bad, like putting that food in the box. And yeah, I mean, we'd be silly to ditch that. Like, you know, winter's coming and people are going to want to eat at home. So yeah.
I think we're all getting used to being at home a little too much. But anyway, we're now going on to our next part, which is the final part, which is very important part too of the talk, which is the industry as the whole. You know, we talked about the Montreal scene. We talked about your personal challenges, breakthroughs, epiphanies. But I want to know what you think about COVID as a whole. You know, how do you think that this will change the industry for your colleagues? You know, there's a lot of talk even in our city, but in other cities, that there are too many restaurants. So we're hearing that a lot of restaurants will close, which will be a very bad, tragic thing for a lot of people. Maybe it will be advantageous to some people as well. But how are you seeing this as a whole affecting the restaurant industry? We'll start with Mandy.
I think that if anyone's thinking of opening up a restaurant in the next couple of years, I think that the layout of these restaurants is going to be really rethought. So much of the time, the dining room, especially in sort of like mega restaurants, the dining rooms are so enormously expensive. When you're opening up and starting a restaurant to outfit, yes, of course, kitchens cost a lot of money and all the equipment, but the dining rooms are so heavy. And I think that even when we do get out of this, when there's a vaccine or we slowly, get to the other side, there's still going to be some like post-traumatic stress disorder of so many people being in a closed space. So maybe the opposite will happen, where the kitchens will be much bigger and there'll be very minimal dining rooms, or it'll be a lot more, parking lot access to pick up your food, or larger eating spaces outside, or maybe new picnic baskets to take with you. I don't think it's going to I don't think the vaccine's going to come out and everyone's going to be comfortable going back into close inside quarters, which saddens me. Eating out and eating with loved ones, it's such a part of our culture. It's such a part of our joy, not just in Montreal, but, the world over. And, maybe the more optimistic or emotional side of things, when this is over and when we can do that again and break bread together and share long hours at the same table and sharing food and experiences, I think that, like most things that we're taking for granted pre-pandemic, will just be appreciated and enjoyed that much more.
And following what Mandy said, but Mark, I'm going to ask you more specifically when it comes to gastronomy, because this whole world of gastronomy, expensive menus, multi-course menus, hours at the table, rich food. I'm just wondering how you feel about how gastronomy will fare in the future. Is there hope for gastronomy, or is it all going to be fried chicken sandwiches?
Well,
I love a good fried chicken sandwich.
Yeah, everyone does. They're great. Yeah. I think that like gastronomic experience, the formal tasting menu 3-hour experience, it has been on the wane for some years now. Like people like bustling, crowded rooms and sharing plates and like informal service and that stuff's all great, but that's not really, we're not going to see that for a while now. There's no bustling rooms. There's no atmosphere like that. There's not really sharing plates anymore. So I actually think that gastronomic experience is going to see a bit of a resurgence. I think people are going to seek out like a sort of calm, focused, complete, like well-defined dining experience, kind of removing all those variables. I think what when people were shunning fine dining, what they wanted was like to be able to like order this when they feel like they want that, and like we'll just order one thing for now and then we'll order. It's like it's exciting to sort of like be choosing your own adventure like as you go, but I don't think that's going to be what people want so much anymore. I think people are going to be down to have like, okay, we're going out to this restaurant tonight. It's like, this is our entertainment. We're going to be there for the whole evening. We're going to be there for 3 hours and we're going to have what these people have made for us. And I think that works also with what restaurants need right now. If you're only allowed to seat half of your restaurant, you need that half capacity to be spending good money. Like you can't have someone like sitting at the bar eating like a snack and having a glass of wine. Like if there's only 15 spots, you need people to drop like $100, $150 to like make that worthwhile for you. So I think that should be okay. Yeah, or more. Yeah, ideally more.
So dining out's going to get more expensive, because if you're saying in your places, if you're also going to try to eliminate tipping, the price will be adjusted and people will have to. But with our entertainment options so dismal these days, maybe fine dining will become, a lot of people see it as the theater of fine dining, an opportunity to go out in I think they'll always have to be in a safe space. But, you know, we have all seen these bubbles. I mean, I don't know about that, but I don't know, little igloos. We could do igloo dining. I think igloo dining would be good. But, you know, all these people on the other side too have been cooking at home. So you know, I'm wondering, do you guys feel that people might be saying, hey, we didn't have to go out to eat. We can do it ourselves. Like, is there a fear that the restaurant will be forgotten because of all these people making sourdough bread and, you know, Portuguese tarts and all this? Are you afraid that your customer can turn in a way into your competition? Mandy?
No way. I've considered it, but no. It's a joy though. I mean, we did have a cookbook that came out in July, and it's a joy to see people posting pictures of the meals that they've made from the cookbook, and it makes us so happy to see people using a cookbook. But I don't think that it's a realistic or sustainable plan to be home cooking from, you know, medium to difficult fancy recipes. I mean, I love cooking. I absolutely adore it. And if there's a particular meal I really want, I'll go to the effort to make it. But there's a lot of work that goes into making a nice meal. There's the mental decision making, what you're going to have. There's the time going grocery shopping. There's, you know, all the myriad ways to prepare and chop, marinate, braise, boil, saute, whatever the recipe calls for. And then, you know, you eat it in what, like 20, 30 minutes. And then it's an hour of washing dishes. So it's a beautiful idea, but it's not a sustainable one if you're, you know, in quarantine and there's kids at home. I mean, I was so over the moon that other restaurants were delivering. We've ordered from Lawrence a whole bunch of times. Uber Eats was like the #1 app on my phone. It gets tiring. I mean, you have to either really, really love it or love washing dishes or have a lot of time on your hands. And yeah.
Okay, so taking it now off what Mandy said, Mark. So if the restaurant isn't just there to supply us with food, because we can now make it ourselves, right? Because we're all making sourdough bread. What role
I don't think anyone's doing it anymore. No one's making sourdough bread
my
anymore.
sourdough starts in the fridge for a month. I agree. But there was a while there. But no, but I'm just wondering, like, because of that idea that Mandy was saying is that, you know, we want the restaurants for food because we don't want to cook ourselves all the time. What about the restaurant playing a role in the community that's just greater, you know, especially in a place like Montreal where our identity is so tied to our restaurants? You know, it's like the thing we're proud of here in Montreal. It's like, if we lose this, will the face of our city change? Like, how do you feel your restaurant contributes, or the importance of your restaurant in this city?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting issue. I think something that we've learned from the pandemic is that restaurants, if they want to be sustainable, they really need to serve their community. Some restaurants do, and some restaurants don't. A lot of restaurants rely on tourism, and like, okay, like you're gonna get a boost in the summer, like that's, you know, that's normal. But now we can't rely on tourism. We can't rely on travel. So we need to make sure that, like, if we're opening a restaurant in a neighborhood, are we serving that neighborhood? Like, can the people that live in that neighborhood afford to eat there? Like, or did we just open a super expensive restaurant in a poorer neighborhood because the rent's cheap? And I think that bodes well for, like, the Montreal restaurant scene. Like, when tourists go to a city and they want to eat, they were looking on like Eater or whatever, they're reading your reviews, Leslie, then they want an authentic experience. They want a place where the locals go. Like, no one wants to go to a tourist trap restaurant. So I think that's something that people really need to be keeping in mind, like, especially the sort of younger people who are looking into opening their own restaurants. Yeah, make sure that you're serving the community that you're in, because if you're not, then you're really just the sort of harbinger of gentrification, and you're also vulnerable to something like a pandemic or bad weather or many things.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I never thought about that before we started this discussion, is how much a great neighborhood restaurant really serves its surrounding. The customers come from around. And in fact, sometimes I think I'd love to live in a community where I could walk to restaurants and know them. And, you know, just even if you don't feel like cooking, just to go and hang out, or if you're a bit down, or, you know, and you really have that with your restaurant, especially Larry's. There are a lot of, you know, locals there and regulars there. I think that's the goal for everybody. But again, like as a contrast again, there's been a lot of talk recently about this idea of the ghost kitchen. And for people who don't know, this idea of the ghost kitchen is the idea of having a hub in an area of the city that would be quite central, but that you wouldn't have to pay a lot of rent. And it really is just a kitchen that would supply a lot of satellite restaurants or be used for delivery. So I think, Mandy, like your model could work very well, as much as your restaurants are beautiful with or without the cut flowers, and really serve communities. I think of your restaurant in Westmount that, you know, there are a million moms with strollers there, and, you know, dads too, but moms with strollers. But how do you feel about this idea of having a central hub, you know, and you're not really producing on site, but that way you could handle delivery, and you could also handle delivering to your restaurants? What's your thought on that?
I think it's an excellent plan B. You know, if plan A for a fine dining establishment or, you know, an on-site restaurant is not working given the pandemic's restraints, a ghost kitchen is actually a brilliant idea, in my opinion. You know, it could really, you know, save you costs on all the outfitting of the front of your house, the decor, the staff, the technology you need, you know, just to get the look of a dining room just so with the lighting. I mean, it can cost a small fortune, absolutely. So if you look at a ghost kitchen and, you know, you're focused on the quality and the consistency of the food, you're doing it in, you know, a healthy way where there's not that much interaction with, you know, customers coming in, you know, whether it's delivery drivers coming by. And I think it could really, really work well in a densely populated, you know, suburb close to downtown that maybe other delivery service apps aren't getting to, because there's always sort of pockets where third party delivery services don't get to. So it's something that we've been talking about in our company for sure, if this goes on for a while.
Right. Now, this is going to be the final question of the talk itself. And then if anybody has questions, we really want you to ask some questions too. And I'm sure there are questions after all these different things have been brought up. But I want to ask the two of you, and I'm going to start with Mark because Mandy just finished, so it's Mark's turn. How do you feel about this idea of everything going back to normal? So let's say next week there's a vaccine, we're all vaccinated, and everything goes back to normal. Would you be happy with that? Or would you see this as would you see that as a wasted opportunity after everything you guys have been through for change, just to go back to normal? How do you feel about going back to normal or not?
Well, we can't go back to normal even if we wanted to. Even if the vaccine was available tomorrow, I think things have changed permanently. Lots of restaurants have closed. Lots more will close, even if the vaccine arrives tomorrow. It's going to take a long time for people to really feel comfortable just going back to their normal lives, if they ever do. Like, I think some of the trends that we've talked about earlier on in the talk, like they're like, that's going to happen. Like, even if the vaccine starts tomorrow. And even if we could, I don't think that we would want to go back to normal. Normal was very vulnerable for the industry. It was harmful to a lot of the workers within the industry. Unsustainable for many parts of the food chain. So I really think we gotta take this opportunity to just burn it to the ground and rebuild it in a way that works for everyone.
I like that. Burn it to the ground. All right. Mandy, are you up for burning it to the ground and starting afresh?
I am. I'm up for burning it down. Phoenix rising from the ashes. Let's do this better. You know, there was a chunk before about social changes and movements that have been happening in congruence with the pandemic that I didn't get a chance to touch on, and I won't try to because there's a lot I wanted to say. But in looking forward to and hoping to build a better industry and a safer industry for not only minorities or people of color, or Black people or women, like for everybody, and for the restaurant industry to not be always in peril, to not always have such tight cash flows that they can't properly pay their staff, to not be able to grow their business because they're in this tight situation with their finances. And part of that problem is in part to do with the fact that restaurants don't charge what they should be charging. And there's this, every quarter we meet and we're like, okay, well, this is what we should charge for this dish, but we don't charge it because of the perception that it's going to be too expensive. Well, people need to know that, running and opening and operating a restaurant and paying staff and paying for your overhead and paying your suppliers and your rent, it's expensive, and we love what we do, but there's so much benefit on a humanitarian level that could come from shifting that perception of expensive food. And that also ties into a lot of the social movements that we're seeing, like why are there not more chefs of color? Why are there not more female chefs that are making it to the top 10 lists? Why are they just disregarded and not considered real chefs? Why is certain cuisine from certain parts of the world not considered fine dining or gastronomical if it's not from Europe or from Japan? There's so many things within the food industry that if you shine a light on it, these conversations need to be had and they need to be out in the open. And I think that when, we know better, we do better. So, we're trying in our company to do better on all of these levels. And I don't want to go back to normal either. I want to go forward to better.
Yeah, good. And absolutely. And it's funny because now that we've had this talk, we've got to, we've got to spread the word. So it's got to be, I think everybody will feel that way. I don't think it's just you two. I think that's kind of a feeling in the industry that it's time to rethink things, even your lives. Even I always think that chefs work so hard and they love it. But on the other hand, there has to be family time too. There has to be reasonable hours for restaurants that serve your customers and yet, give you a personal life as well. And salaries, and we can go on and on and on. And I think you're absolutely right, Mandy, is that people don't realize that you're often not, a lot of people will say to me, oh, Mandy, salads are expensive, or, a night of La Rosse is going to cost you. Yes, well, there's a reason that happens. Exactly. We're going to finish up with some questions, and we already have some questions from people listening. If anybody has more questions, now's the time, but we already have some. So I'm starting with one from Christy, which says, since lockdown, I've been using food delivery apps to order from restaurants. I noticed one thing, that these apps are really community style based. So she says she has to go to one app for Asian food, another for Italian food, etc. She's wondering if the two speakers encountered any fit issues to choose the corporate apps that suit their restaurant. Interesting question. That's true, I've noticed that. What do you think? Mandy, since you're kind of more on these apps, how did you choose the apps that you would use, the companies that you would use for your delivery?
We chose the services provided based on different companies, based on, the deal that we could both be happy with at the end of the day. How far reaching was there, how many postal codes could they cover, what was the algorithm with the speed with which they could get their food, price negotiations. It was really, business decisions and who could do the job the best and who could do the job the best for certain communities based on our 8 locations. But I've never encountered like a delivery service app for different culture fits,
right.
If that's what the question is.
You haven't noticed that. Okay, interesting.
No.
Yes, next question, Sophia. Interesting one. A lot of people would have. As a client that would dine out 3 or 4 times per week pre-COVID, I'm now afraid to return, especially when we hear of stories of owners allowing their chef to work with COVID symptoms. I don't know about that, but any tips on how to overcome her phobia? I would start off by saying that people don't realize that very good restaurants have extraordinarily clean kitchens, extraordinary, already before COVID, if people were sick, they weren't working. There are regulations already, but maybe Mark, you want to add to that about how can you make the customers feel safe?
Well, I mean, certainly pre-COVID, there was this, there was this feeling in restaurants that like you couldn't take days off because there were people relying on you. So I think there were times that people worked where they probably shouldn't. And I think COVID has really changed all that. Now, like, yeah, I'll get a text message at 8 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I have a little bit of a tickly cough. I guess I can't come into work. And yeah, you can't. Like, that's, I don't know. Yeah, we've gone through that so many times. It's like anyone has like the absolute slightest symptom, you got to go get tested right away. You can't work until you got your results, and that's it. Thankfully, we've not had anyone test positive, and we've all been like multiple times to get tested. I one thing I would say is that I think it's in restaurant operators' interests to make sure that they're not the epicenter of an outbreak. Like that's the end of any restaurant, right? So I think there's as much at stake for restaurant owners as anyone else, and we're like sanitizing the hell out of our hands like 100 times a day. We're wearing masks. We're not going anywhere near anyone. I mean, we're doing everything that we can. And at the end of the day, though, like if you don't feel comfortable going to restaurants, like don't go to restaurants for a while. That's okay.
Wait until you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Exactly. A question by Lee. Question for the two of you. Are you passing down the cost of PPE and precautionary measures to the customers, or did you choose to take less of a profit margin, and why? As in, have you been charging surcharges to customers to absorb the new expenses due to COVID, PPE, or absorbing the cost as just a new cost of business?
Profit margin?
It's a new cost of business.
What's that, a profit margin?
Yeah. Go on, Mandy.
No, we've been sucking it up. It's just the way that our business has to be. I mean, of course there was an option, but we never even discussed it. And we wanted our staff to feel super safe, and we want our customers to feel super safe, and not just feel, but actually, ensure their safety. So it was never a question for us to add a surcharge for the extra PPE that we have to absorb.
Right. And you, Mark?
Well, I mean, we're already sort of charging the same amount for takeout and delivery food that we were charging for dine-in, so we can't add anything more to that now. Yeah, it's another expense, and I think.
Is it a big expense? How big an expense is it?
Kind of, yeah. I don't know. It's like one of those expenses, and there are so many of these in restaurants where it's $50 here, $100 there, like $200 there. You're not factoring that into the cost of your hamburger. It's like
right.
But yeah, it's pretty expensive. Like you buy what seems like 1,000 masks, and then someone texts you to say, "Oh, we're out of masks." It is expensive, but I mean, we're getting support from the government, and everyone's lives are more expensive right now. People are like earning less money. I mean, everyone has to buy masks for themselves. I think, I don't know. It's just something that we have to deal with.
Right. We have a good question here. This is interesting. Gabriella, do you think there'll be a shift in the location of future restaurants? Less so in the downtown core and closer to neighborhoods, interesting, along the lines of what we spoke about, to residential areas, seeing as a lot more people are working and schooling from home now. So Mandy, you jump in on this one.
Yeah, definitely. If this is the new normal for the next foreseeable future, whether it's a year or 2 years, absolutely. We've seen it in our restaurants, closing 2 at the beginning that were downtown where nobody was, versus the ones that were in more residential areas that were actually, doing pretty well, almost normal numbers at the best of times. So it goes to show that people are stuck at home. They're sick of cooking. They want food. And I think it's definitely the way to go.
Mark, do you feel the same way?
Yeah,
You're
I
kind of
think
in a
so.
semi-residential, like,
Yeah,
commercial and residential.
yeah, we're sort of half and half, and like we do have a lunch crowd. We have that huge Ubisoft video game building just up the street. There's like 1,800 people that work there. I think some of them are at work. I mean, people are going to be slowly going back to work, I think. We might see fewer restaurants offering lunch, and or lunch more as a delivery thing. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I think we're fine where we are. I think we'll see less of people just like leaving the office for an hour and like going to have a fancy lunch because they're just at home. They'll just have I think everyone's just gonna have Mandy salad for lunch.
Mandy agrees. Mandy likes that idea. Question by Yojin: would COVID have an influence on how chefs and restaurants use local food? What about a customer preference for local food or ingredients? We've seen a huge wave towards local during COVID. Did you both jump in? But you were probably also already using a lot of local ingredients anyway, especially Mark, because he had more of a seasonal menu. Mandy can't get romaine lettuce here probably in January, right?
Nope.
So, but for Mark, where you always have been local, no?
We always have been local. I mean, you have to make the odd exception. Like, unfortunately, like lemons just don't grow here, and we all want to eat lemons. Not just eat lemons like that. But I don't know. I think COVID sort of was the first time that people maybe of this generation were really worried about their food supply or their food chain. There was sort of like, oh, there's a shortage of something, but we've never experienced that before. So I think it made people think for the first time about where their food came from, and like, is this, when the borders were closed, it's like, do the things that I want, are they made here or are they made abroad, and am I going to be able to get them still? And also in a time of crisis, people want to support their like community more, as we talked about earlier. So I think for us, we'll keep doing what we're doing, but it seems like people are looking for that sort of thing a little bit more, which is
right.
Good
and you, Mandy, because you have it's more challenging for you to use local ingredients all year long.
Yeah, there's definitely a need for a supply chain coming from states, especially or more tropical climates for a lot of our ingredients. However, we have seen a shift in people really wanting to support, even more than ever, support local. So, collaborating with a farm that grows lettuce on the west end of the island, we've done specials with, trying to get people who are growing their fresh herbs and sprouts in town to really, band together, because it's tough. It's really tough for business right now. And we see it from our customers too. When we started selling our cookbook on Amazon can up and down the price. And then people were complaining that they wanted their money back because they saw Amazon was selling their book cheaper than what we were selling it at the store. And I said, it's up to you. Like, we'll gladly refund you, but do you want to support Amazon or would you like to support local? It's your choice. And I think that a lot of people are thinking a little bit more consciously about that and how they're spending their money. And if they really do sincerely support a local business, they're trying in every way they can to, to collaborate or to support them.
We have a very good question here from Nancy. What would you say to students in cooking school right now, thinking about going on their stage in the near future? Tough year for a stage.
When can you start? That's what I say.
There you go. There's a stage there with Mark.
I mean, don't be disheartened. Restaurants are going to be here forever, like in one way or another. People are going to be making food that's creative and interesting, and like you're going to get to have your profession. So yeah, I mean, apply to the restaurants that you want to do your stage at. Like, many of them are operating. Restaurants are slowly, tentatively opening their dining rooms. So yeah, go ahead. Like, you'll find it's a little awkward in the kitchen. You're wearing a mask and you're trying to taste things every 2 minutes, and everything, you have to be extra careful about everything. So it's an odd time to do a stage, don't get me wrong, but like, you're gonna be fine. Just like go follow your dream, and there'll be a good career for you. And a lot of the things that we've been talking about in this talk, like hopefully your job will be healthier, and you'll be happier in it, and hopefully get paid more as well.
Yeah, you'll be in a better position than all of us were in when we worked in kitchens, that's for sure.
Yeah, hopefully.
Another question from Mark, from Aki at Laurence. What model are you using for sharing the service fees with the front back of house? How are the front of house staff with this kind of change?
It's a very good question, and something that I've been dealing with a lot over the last few months. We haven't quite started doing it at Larry's. We started it at Laurence as a trial, and in the next couple of weeks we're going ahead with it fully at Larry's. So the model that we went with is a revenue share. So first of all the prices for dine-in are going to be going up by 20%. There's no way around that part of it. That's a little scary because people look at a menu and it's gonna look expensive. Like, we can shout from the rooftops that it's service included, but I find myself like going through the new prices and I'm like, oh, that seems pretty expensive. And then I'm like, oh, I've forgotten that also includes the tip. So it's like, it's not actually more expensive. It's just presented to you differently. So the prices are going to go up 20%. 10% of that will be split evenly between everybody who's working. So front of house, back of house, over the whole pay period. And then the other 10% goes towards raising the hourly wages of the front of house workers. So currently, front of house workers earn minimum wage and then they make quite a lot in tips. Now they'll be earning like a good hourly rate, and their revenue share will be less than their tips were before. And how are they taking it? Well, it's actually been amazing. Like, everyone that I've spoken to about it has been very supportive. People know that most of them are going to earn a bit less money than they were before, but like, they know that it's got to happen. It's the right thing to do. And it's also providing people with a bit more stability. Like, you can earn a few $100 on a night, on like a busy night when you're making tips, and then another night you'll make nothing, and the winter you'll make less, and the summer you'll make more. And it's hard for servers to sort of like plan their lives and like know really like how much money they have. So at least in this new system, even if they might be earning a little bit less overall, there's like an awful lot more stability for them.
Right. Okay. We have a question here. I think we're coming to the close of the questions, but from Vincent, with people losing their jobs due to COVID or generally lose some buying capacity, would you do something to make gastronomic food more accessible, which kind of goes against what we were saying about getting ready to pay more? Mm-hmm. Mandy, what do you think of that?
To make gastronomic food more accessible, that's a tricky one. It depends on how it's served.
I think,
Mark,
it's for all we've just been talking about, well, just get used to it. Like, food's going to have to be more expensive. Restaurants are going to be more expensive. There is definitely the flip side to that, which is fewer people are going to be able to afford food. And like, yeah, it's I don't know, it's easy to say, and I hear lots of restaurant owners, and we're saying it too. It's like, it's just got to be more expensive, like, deal with it. But for a lot of people, dealing with it means that they just can't eat out anymore. So I honestly, I don't have an answer to that question, but it's certainly something that I've been thinking a lot about, and something that needs to be addressed. But no, I don't know.
You don't know, yeah. Okay, so final question, and it's a bit of a rebellious question. Do you think that we, and this Nicholas, who's speaking for anyone in the restaurant business, should have the ability to choose how we run our business on our own terms? If individuals are not afraid of going out, shouldn't they be able to eat how they wish? Recognizing there is a risk, shouldn't we be able to make our own choice for reasons of personal health when people's jobs and livelihoods are dependent on the choices they make? That you should be, deciding yourselves how to run your restaurants. What do you think, Mark?
I don't agree with that. I think we need government guidelines. Like, I'm not a scientist. Mandy's not I don't think Mandy's a scientist. Are you a scientist? No. Like we can read the news and we can decide what we think about things, but I don't think that I don't think you want to put a bunch of like chefs and restaurant owners in charge of like keeping the public at large safe any more than like we are in that position right now. I think we can sanitize our hands and we can wear masks and we can do that, but I don't think it can be up to us to decide what's okay. You walk down some busy streets and there's restaurants that are just open like normal, like no distancing, people aren't wearing masks, and it's like if you let everyone just operate their business how they want right now, then what that will mean is down the line, a lot of us can't operate our business how we want because we still have COVID. Like we got to get rid of it so we can get back to that more
right. And you guys don't tell you don't tell the scientists how to make a béarnaise sauce, right? So it's like everybody has their profession. And I've been asked to add one more question, and I'll go with Mandy this time. Lee asks, what best practices will you continue to use in your business that you have adopted by necessity during the pandemic? Do you see the heightened safety and hygiene measures in the kitchen as a positive takeaway of COVID? Already people should know there are quite strict hygiene requirements, and there are inspectors who come into kitchen, but is there another level that you have gone to, or something you had to do because of COVID that you'll always hold on to?
I think that having to go back to a more skeletal business model, and as we spoke about earlier, sort of cutting the fat a little bit, and the things that we were, tending to spend money on is something that we'll, I think, focus on and continue to hold post-COVID, and that's applicable to even our payroll. How many people do we need to have on the floor? Our whole culture at Mandy's and the brand is kind of abundance. There's like a lot of everything, and your salad's overflowing, and maybe it doesn't have to be like that. And we're not going to skimp out on anything, but just to keep, almost like a metaphor, to keep sight of what's really important, and let the rest fall away, kind of thing.
Okay, Mark, anything for you? Is there anything that you had to do during COVID? Will you always wear a mask, Mark, when you work? Dying to rip it off.
I hope I don't have to. Well, I mean, we'll keep paying the front of house and back of house the same as each other. So that's gonna hold. Yeah, like Mandy says, just being a little more careful, not making decisions that are like detracting from what we're offering, but maybe cutting out some of those things that no one else notices except for us, that are costing quite a lot of money.
Right, sounds good. Well, I'd like to thank you both and thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks, Mandy. Thanks, Mark. What a revelation. We practiced a lot for this, but I got to say I learned even more tonight. So thank you both. And now I'll turn it back to Marina. Thank you.
The public and the restaurant community as a whole. Thank you for everyone online for being here, and I hope that you have found this conversation just as enjoyable and insightful as we all did in the back. We as a community are continuously looking to improve, so please complete the survey that will be sent out to you shortly. As a gift to you all, our speakers have generously offered our attendees a wonderful recipes that you will be receiving via email in the upcoming few days. Stay tuned for more exciting announcements and continued conversations about our future events by signing up to our newsletters and following us on social media. Thank you again and have a wonderful night.